The grand ballroom was filled with soft music, the air fragrant with flowers. I stood at the altar, my heart pounding with anticipation. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the moment I would finally marry James, the man I loved more than anything. I glanced around, seeing the familiar faces of friends and family, all gathered to witness our union. As I turned to James, ready to say our vows, I noticed something strange in his eyes. There was hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty. My smile faltered slightly, but I told myself it was just nerves. Then, in front of everyone, he took a deep breath and turned away from me, toward my twin sister, Emily. The room fell silent, the music abruptly stopping. My heart froze as James spoke, his voice echoing through the hall. "I can't do this," he said, his gaze fixed on Emily. "I love her." For a moment, time seemed to stop. I felt like I was in a nightmare, unable to process what was happening. My mind raced, but I couldn't understand how or why. All I could see was James, the man who was supposed to be mine, looking at Emily with a love that should have been for me. In front of everyone, he chose my twin sister, leaving me humiliated and heartbroken. My legs felt weak as I turned and stumbled down the aisle, my vision blurred by tears. I could hear the shocked whispers of guests, but they all melted into a dull roar as I pushed through the doors and ran out of the venue, devastated and confused, my wedding dress trailing behind me. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my life felt like a fairy tale, and James was the prince who made it all possible. We met 3 years ago at a charity event in downtown Los Angeles. I still remember how he introduced himself with that charming smile, making me laugh within minutes. It was easy, effortless, like we were meant to find each other. From that night on, we were inseparable. We spent our weekends exploring the city, sunset picnics on the beach, rooftop dinners with views of the twinkling city lights, and long walks down the bustling streets of Santa Monica. Our relationship grew naturally, from that first date to the moment he whispered, "I love you," while we watched the stars from his balcony. I was sure he was the one. Our plans for the future were just as perfect. We talked about everything, traveling to Europe, buying a house in the suburbs, and starting a family. Every little thing felt exciting, like we were building a life together, brick by brick. When he proposed to me at Griffith Observatory, with the twinkling city below, it felt like all my dreams were coming true. I remember the way he looked at me when he slipped that ring on my finger, and I thought, this is it. This is forever. Our wedding was supposed to be the culmination of our love story. I had planned every detail, the flowers, the colors, the music. My heart was full, and I couldn't wait to walk down the aisle to James. But there was one person who cast a shadow over my happiness, even if I didn't want to admit it, my twin sister, Emily. Emily had always been by my side. Growing up, we shared everything, from toys to secrets. But as we got older, it became clear that there was a silent competition between us. She was supportive, sure, but there was always this underlying tension. Whenever I achieved something, whether it was a promotion at work or even when James proposed, there was this flicker of envy in her eyes, quickly masked by a congratulatory smile. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just my imagination. After all, she was my sister, my twin, the person who should have been happiest for me. She was there when I picked out my wedding dress. She helped me plan the seating arrangements, and she even threw me the most beautiful bridal shower. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a part of her that wanted what I had. Still, I didn't let it bother me. I was too excited, too focused on the wedding to worry about anything else. I believed James and I were solid, that nothing could come between us. We were just days away from the big day, and I was lost in a whirlwind of last-minute details, finalizing the guest list, confirming the caterer, rehearsing my vows. I had no idea that the storm was already brewing, just out of sight, waiting to shatter the perfect world I had built. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the elegant wedding venue in Malibu. The ocean waves lapped gently against the shore, creating a perfect backdrop for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I stood in the bridal suite, looking out at the guests who were beginning to gather, my heart pounding with excitement. My dress shimmered in the light, and I felt like a princess in a fairy tale. Today, I was going to marry James, the man I loved more than anything. As I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with my father, I couldn't stop smiling. The rows of smiling faces, the soft melody playing in the background, and the scent of fresh flowers made everything feel like a dream. My eyes locked with James's, and I saw him standing at the altar, looking handsome and calm. I felt a wave of love wash over me. This was it. This was our moment. When I reached the altar, James took my hands in his. My heart fluttered as he smiled at me, and I thought about everything we had been through to get to this point. The minister began to speak, but I barely heard the words. All I could think about was the future we were about to start together. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "Do you, James, take her to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. There was a pause. It was slight, but noticeable. I looked up at James, expecting to see him smiling back at me, but he wasn't. His eyes were downcast, and I saw his hands trembling slightly. "James," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He raised his head slowly, and when he looked at me, there was something in his eyes that made my heart stop. It wasn't love. It was hesitation, fear even. The guests shifted in their seats, sensing that something was wrong. The music faded to a soft hum, leaving a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I can't do this," James said, his voice breaking slightly. A gasp rippled through the crowd. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. "What?" I managed to say, barely able to breathe. James's grip on my hands tightened, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like he was holding on to something he was about to lose. "I'm sorry," he said, turning away from me and facing the guests. "I can't marry her, because I'm in love with Emily." The words hung in the air, echoing in my ears. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was falling, spiraling into a nightmare. I turned to look at my twin sister, Emily, who was standing off to the side, her eyes wide with shock. She wasn't saying anything. She just stood there, frozen, as if she couldn't believe it either. The guests started whispering, their confusion and shock palpable. I could hear fragments of their words, but it was all a blur. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest, and I could barely breathe. "James, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. He turned back to me, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," he said again, but the words felt empty. "I can't go through with this. I love her." I looked at Emily, hoping she would say something, do something to stop this from spiraling further. But she remained silent, her eyes filling with tears. It was as if she was caught between wanting to run away and wanting to disappear altogether. She didn't deny his words. She didn't tell him to stop. She just stood there. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. The man I was supposed to marry, the man I had trusted with my heart, was standing there, confessing his love for my twin sister. And she was letting him. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't listen to another word. Without thinking, I let go of his hands and turned, my feet carrying me down the aisle as fast as they could. The whispers of the guests grew louder, but I didn't care. I felt numb, as if I was moving through a haze. The world around me had shattered, and I was running from the pieces. As I burst through the double doors, the warm sun hit my face, but it didn't bring any comfort. I ripped off my veil, letting it fall to the ground as I ran, tears streaming down my cheeks. I didn't stop until I was far from the venue, far from the people, and far from the pain that threatened to consume me. The world outside my apartment kept moving, but I couldn't. I had closed myself off from everything, drawn the curtains, turned off my phone, and let the silence swallow me whole. I didn't want to face the world, not after what happened at the wedding. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James at the altar, turning away from me and confessing his love for Emily. The words replayed over and over, each time cutting deeper than the last. How did I miss it? How did I not see the signs that something was wrong? I thought about our last few months together, James's distracted smiles, the way he'd sometimes drift off during our conversations. I had told myself it was just wedding jitters, that everyone got nervous before the big day. I never imagined that he was falling for my twin sister, the person I trusted the most. I sat on the couch, staring at the engagement ring that I still hadn't taken off. It felt heavy now, as if it was mocking me, a symbol of a promise that was shattered in front of everyone I cared about. I thought about everything James and I had planned, the house, the honeymoon, the life we were supposed to build together. How could he throw all of that away so easily? But the betrayal didn't end with him. Emily, my sister, my other half, had been there, silent. She didn't speak up, didn't defend me, didn't tell James to stop. When I looked at her at the wedding, I saw shock on her face, but I also saw something else, acceptance. She didn't reject him, she didn't walk away, and that hurt even more than James's words. I felt humiliated, like my life had been reduced to a spectacle for everyone to see. I could still hear the whispers of the guests, the confusion and pity in their voices as I ran out of the venue. I thought I could outrun the pain, but it followed me here, into the confines of my own home, and now I was drowning in it. For days, I barely left the apartment. I didn't know how to face the world, how to answer the inevitable questions from friends and family. I had no idea what to say to James or Emily. Every time I thought about calling them, my chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. What was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to beg for an explanation? Or worse, an apology? I finally decided that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be the person who tried to piece everything back together, who tried to make sense of the chaos. I needed to heal, and I couldn't do that if I was still tethered to James or Emily. So, I took out my phone and typed 2 short messages, one to James and one to Emily. I need time, please don't contact me. And then, with a sense of finality, I deleted their numbers. It felt strange, like cutting away a part of myself, but I knew it was necessary. If I was ever going to find peace, I had to let them go. I had to learn how to be okay on my own, without the weight of their betrayal hanging over me. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger and placed it on the coffee table, watching it catch the light one last time. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I knew I didn't want it anymore. It belonged to a past I needed to leave behind. As I sat there, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days, strength. It was faint, but it was there. Maybe I wasn't ready to move on just yet, but I was ready to start. And for now, that was enough. I never meant for it to happen. Watching my sister, the MC, build her perfect life with James was like watching someone live the dream I always wanted. It wasn't that I didn't love her, I did. But there was always this voice in the back of my mind, whispering that she had everything, while I was stuck in the background, forgotten. At first it was small things. When James and the MC got engaged, I was genuinely happy for her. But as the wedding planning went on, I started to feel a pang of jealousy. The way he looked at her, the way they would laugh together. It was a bond I couldn't share with anyone. I felt like an outsider in my own sister's life, a spectator to her happiness. I began to spend more time with them, telling myself that I was just helping out. James was easy to talk to, and I found myself opening up to him. We'd talk about the wedding, about life, about things that had nothing to do with my sister. At first, it felt harmless, but the more time I spent with him, the more I began to wish that he was looking at me the way he looked at her. I didn't plan to undermine their relationship. It just happened. When the MC would get busy with wedding preparations, I'd offer to step in, help James with errands, or join him for lunch when she couldn't. I thought I was just being a good sister, but deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was creating moments, little gaps that only I could fill. And the more James confided in me, the more I felt like I belonged with him. I didn't want to admit it, but I had started falling for him. I knew it was wrong, but every time he laughed at my jokes or asked for my opinion, it felt like a piece of validation I had been searching for my whole life. For once, I wasn't just the MC's twin sister, I was someone special. Then, at the wedding, everything changed. When James turned away from the MC and said he loved me, my heart skipped a beat. I should have said something, should have told him to stop, but I didn't. Hearing him confess his love for me, in front of everyone, felt like a twisted kind of victory. I had wanted to be noticed, and now I was. But it wasn't the way I imagined. I looked at my sister, standing there in her wedding dress, her eyes wide with shock and pain, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had spent so much time trying to prove that I was worthy of love, and now I had taken it from the one person who didn't deserve to be hurt. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything. My silence felt like the safest place to be, even if it meant betraying her. As James's words echoed through the room, I just stood there, frozen, unable to move. I could feel all eyes on me, waiting for me to respond, but my throat closed up. I wasn't brave enough to tell the truth, nor strong enough to walk away. So I let the moment pass, and in that silence, I made a choice that would change everything. I still remember the look on the MC's face as she ran out of the venue. It was a look I'll never forget, one that haunts me to this day. I had wanted James's love, but I had lost my sister's. And for what? Validation? Attention? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that my silence had cost me more than I ever imagined, and there was no going back. The ballroom was elegantly lit, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm, inviting glow over the guests. The charity event in San Francisco was one of the city's most high-profile affairs, bringing together entrepreneurs, celebrities, and philanthropists. I had been invited as a guest speaker, a testament to how far I'd come over the past decade. It was strange, looking back at how my life had changed. 10 years ago, I was a broken woman, humiliated and betrayed. Today, I was a successful entrepreneur, confident and independent. I had built a company from the ground up, turning my pain into purpose, and now I was thriving. But despite everything, there were still scars that ran deep, even if they weren't visible. As I mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and making connections, I felt a sense of pride in who I had become. I was no longer the fragile woman who had run out of her own wedding. I was someone who had rebuilt her life on her own terms. But as the night went on, I felt a familiar pang of nostalgia, a reminder of the past I thought I had left behind. And then, out of nowhere, I saw him. James stood across the room, looking as though he had seen a ghost. He was still handsome, with that same charming smile, but there was something different about him. His eyes looked tired, as if they had seen too much. For a moment, our eyes locked, and I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, a mix of surprise, curiosity, and perhaps a little anger. But I quickly pushed it down. I wasn't going to let the past take control of my present. James hesitated before walking over, clearly unsure of how to approach me. I could see the nervousness in his step, the way he straightened his tie, trying to regain some composure. "Hey," he said, his voice soft and uncertain. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has," I replied, keeping my tone polite but distant. I could tell he was taken aback by my confidence, by how I held myself. I wasn't the same woman he had left standing at the altar, and he could see it. "I heard about your company," he continued, trying to fill the silence. "It's impressive what you've done. I always knew you had it in you." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply. "I've worked hard." James shifted uncomfortably, searching for the right words. "I'm sorry," he blurted out, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just want you to know that I regret what happened. I made a mistake." I looked at him, the man who had once been my everything, and felt a strange sense of detachment. I had waited years to hear those words, but now that he was saying them, they felt hollow. "I appreciate your apology, James," I said, my voice steady. "But I moved on a long time ago. What happened between us, between you and Emily? It's in the past. I don't need closure from you anymore." He looked down, clearly unsure of how to respond. I was hoping maybe we could catch up, grab coffee sometime." I shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. "I don't think so, James. I'm happy where I am, and I'm not interested in revisiting old wounds. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not with me." For a moment, he looked as though he was going to argue, but then he simply nodded, accepting my words. "You've changed," he said, almost in awe. "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "I have, and I'm not going back." With that, I turned away, walking back into the crowd, my head held high. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, but I had emerged stronger than I ever thought I could be. Seeing James again was a reminder of how far I had come, and as I moved through the ballroom, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. The past was behind me, and I was finally free. James stood in the living room, staring at the open laptop on the table. The screen was filled with messages, notes, schedules, and reminders, but something about them felt off. He wasn't sure why, but he felt compelled to read further, scrolling through the entries. They were written in Emily's voice, but as he went through them, it became clear that many of the things she had said and done over the years were deliberate, calculated. He found entries about their dates, conversations they had, even little comments she had made that he always found odd. Suddenly, it hit him. Emily had been crafting herself into someone she thought he wanted, not someone she truly was. Flashbacks began to flood his mind, moments with Emily that had always felt slightly off. There was that time she planned a date at the art gallery because she thought he liked it, even though she had shown no interest in art before. Or how she suddenly started using phrases and expressions that reminded him of the MC, as if she was trying to mimic her. Back then, James had brushed it off as coincidence, but now, as he stood there, it all made sense. Emily had been trying to be someone else, someone she thought he would love. James's heart sank as he realized what had been missing all this time. It wasn't passion or affection, it was authenticity. With the MC, everything had felt natural, easy. He didn't have to explain himself, she understood him without effort. But with Emily, he had always been trying to make something fit that didn't belong. Feeling a mix of frustration and betrayal, James confronted Emily when she came home. "Emily, I need to ask you something," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Were you ever honest with me, or was everything just an act?" Emily froze, her eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" she asked, a hint of panic in her voice. "I saw your notes, your messages. It's like you were trying to be someone else. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" James's voice cracked slightly, and he felt a pang of guilt. Part of him didn't want to hurt her, but he needed to understand the truth. Emily's shoulders slumped, and she sighed. "I never meant to lie to you, James. I didn't know how else to be around you. I felt like I had to be perfect, like I had to live up to everything she was. I saw how happy you were with her, and I thought if I could be like that, then you would love me." James's heart twisted. "So, you pretended? You tried to turn yourself into the MC?" Emily looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't know what else to do. I wanted you to love me, but I could see how much you missed her, even after everything. I thought if I could be like her, then maybe I could fill that void." James stepped back, feeling like he had been punched in the gut. "Emily, that's not love. That's deception. I thought I was building something real with you, but now I see that everything was built on a lie." Emily's voice broke as she spoke. "I'm sorry, James. I know I hurt you, and I know I hurt her. I never wanted it to turn out like this." James felt his own eyes sting with tears, but he refused to let them fall. "I was searching for the connection I had with the MC. I wanted to feel that again, but I realize now that I was looking in the wrong place. What I had with her was real because it was genuine. I never had to question who she was. But with you, I feel like I've been trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't exist." Emily looked defeated, and for a moment, James almost felt sorry for her. But the weight of the realization was too heavy. He knew what he had to do. "I need to make things right," he said quietly. "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me, but I can't live with this guilt. I have to try." Emily nodded, her face pale. "I understand," she whispered. I'm sorry." James turned and walked out of the room, his mind reeling. He knew that going back to the MC might be impossible. She had moved on, built a new life, and he had no right to disrupt that. But he also knew that he couldn't move forward without at least trying to make amends. Maybe it was too late, but he needed to tell her the truth, even if it was just to give her the closure she deserved. The office was bathed in soft, afternoon light, the cityscape visible through the large windows. I was finishing up some paperwork when I heard a knock at the door. I looked up, surprised to see James standing there, a hesitant smile on his face. My heart skipped a beat, but not in the way it used to. I felt a strange mix of curiosity and indifference. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. I hesitated but nodded, gesturing for him to sit. I could see he was nervous, fidgeting with his hands, searching for the right words. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I have to say it. I made a mistake, and I realize that now. I thought I was in love with Emily, but it was all built on something false. I was searching for a connection, and I didn't see that what I really needed was right in front of me. With you." I listened quietly, my expression calm, as he continued. "I let myself get caught up in something that wasn't real, and I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry." His words, once capable of breaking me, now felt distant, like a faint echo. I had played this moment out in my head 1,000 times, wondering what I would do if he ever tried to come back. Now that it was happening, I felt nothing. "James," I said, my voice steady, "I appreciate your apology. I really do, but I've moved on. That chapter of my life is over, and I don't want to revisit it. What happened between us hurt, but it also made me stronger. I'm in a place now where I don't need to rely on anyone else for my happiness." He looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected me to be so resolute. "But we had something real," he said, almost desperately. "Can't we try again?" I shook my head, a gentle but firm smile on my face. "Maybe it was real once, but that doesn't mean it can be again. We've both changed, James. I'm not the same person I was, and I don't want to go back to being that person. I've built a life that I'm proud of, and I don't need you to be part of it." There was a moment of silence, and I could see the realization settling in his eyes. I could tell he wanted to say more, but he understood that this was the end of the conversation. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice quieter this time. "I really am." "I know," I said, standing up and walking toward the door. "But I'm okay now, and that's all that matters. I wish you well, James, truly. But this is where we part ways." As he left, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had faced the past and walked away from it on my own terms. I no longer needed his validation, his apology, or his love. I was whole, and I was free. I returned to my desk, looking out at the city beyond the window. A smile spread across my face, not because of James, but because of me. I had come a long way, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. I had found my strength, my independence, and that was something no one could ever take away.